Thank you. Right. Thank you very much for that, Atul. That, I must say, most times when people talk about social care, they don't really know the whole ins and outs of it. I think you summarized that very eloquently and very simple as well for people to understand. It's a very important area. And I think this is purely to make sure people are aware of these things and always use these webinars to just increase their knowledge on these things. So in order for us to take questions, before doing the question and answer session, I'd like to just introduce you to the panelists. The two people who are joining Atul are Dr. Anuja Shah and Vishal Shah. Dr. Anuja Shah is a general practitioner partner with some 25 years of experience. She practices at Wheatfield Surgery in Luton. She's a GP trainer. She is also a palliative care lead and has special interest in diabetes and women's health. She is also a primary care network lead. Vishal is founder and managing director of Banyan Home Care Services. He is also a board trustee and treasurer of Care England, the leading representative body for independent care services in England. And he's also a non-executive director of Log My Care, an award-winning digital care planning platform. Vishal has over 15 years of experience working at the senior level in an operational and advisory capacity across a variety of health and social care settings, including national providers, Westminster Healthcare and Barchester Healthcare. Vishal is, by background, a chartered financial analyst charter holder. So without much ado, if I can start off with the first question, I'm going to give Atul Bhai a break and pass the first question on to Anuja. Anuja, there's a thing called personal independence payments, I think, that is available to many people as well. Perhaps you can explain and elaborate on that, please. Thank you. You're muted. Hang on a sec. That's it. Okay, go for it.
Thank you, Ramit. Thank you. It's a very important question, and it is something that we as general practitioners have to deal with on a regular basis. For those who don't know, personal independence payment kicks in when you have a disability. So anybody over the age of 16 until you reach retirement age is eligible for personal independence payment. This is not means tested, and it depends on your disability, depends on how much you're able to do. We as general practitioners get a form to fill out for our patients, and we put in all the evidence that we have, which explains how much the disability is affecting the patient and in their day-to-day activities. But it also helps if the patient themselves can keep their own portfolio, which can include hospital letters or any evidence which will actually strengthen their case and which can prove how their disability affects them. If you're able to do that and provide that along with our form to the council, that would really make things a lot smoother for the patient. Does that explain your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's helpful. Nirmal, you had a question?
Yeah, I had one for, this is actually for Atul Bhai. Is there a standard process that local authorities and councils actually use in doing their assessments for social care? And if it varies, how does it vary? Sorry, Atul Bhai, that one's for you.
Thanks for the question. Now, the whole framework is covered by legislation. So there are legal rules setting out the framework. But the problem we have is that framework is then interpreted not in the same way. There will be variations from council to council. So you can have a situation where one council is much more stricter in its and narrower in its application of the rules, and comes to a view that your needs are not there, or they are less, or how much help is available is less, to another council where they might come to a different view. All of them will have an assessment form, an assessment procedure, assessment criteria. And many times, not just in assessment for care, you also have situations where drugs are available in one medical local authority, but not in another region. So in the same way, you can have differences.
Atul, just a quick follow-up on that. So let's say if someone's care assessment actually started in one borough and they had to move at that point, how is that normally handled?
Okay. Usually, the two boroughs will talk to each other, and they will have to decide how that follows through. And for example, if you are in, say, Barnet, and then you move to Harrow, then there will be a transition. And yes, you can have a situation where it is different for the two boroughs. And then obviously you are not happy with how it is done. My suggestion would be to emphasize and ask for the process where you would have benefited.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, just leading on from that, Atulbhai, one of the questions that's come in, is there a set threshold for social care?
What do you mean by threshold? Threshold in terms of money, in terms of care?
I think in terms of money. I think this is directed in terms of money.
I'll look at both. Now, when you talk about care, it is extremely personal to the person who needs care. So it may be very simple by giving some equipment or adopting the house or help in the home, to the other extreme. So it's much big range from something simple to some extreme measures in terms of care needs. But if it is to do with financing, then there is two figures that you need to look out for capital assets. One is 14,250 and the other one is 23,250. And if your assets are more than 23,250, then usually the council doesn't help you with the care needs.
Thank you.
Now, you may still get other income if you have needs, attendance allowance or income support or other benefits, which you can use towards your care. But deliberately, I left out the actual calculations from this presentation because the idea was to bring awareness with an overview rather than detail of individual calculations. And again, coming back to what I said before, just in the previous answer, you can have different authorities looking at financial assessment slightly differently. So they do have some discretion and they exercise that differently.
Okay.
And with one more point, with income, if you have income, they can take that into account. Or if there is capital above a certain amount, they can turn it into a notional income. So there's much more complex calculations when it comes to actual figures.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Atul, I've got a double question. Basically, talking about putting assets out of your portfolio, and two questions. Firstly, is if somebody has actually given away an asset or gifted an asset, how far back does the period go for the councils when they're considering the financial assessment that, you know, you've given something away and you've done it for the purpose of social care? How far do you need to go back generally? Is it a 2 or 3 year period, or is it a few months? Or
okay, now there isn't an automatic answer to your question, because again, this is one of the regional variations where they look at. As a rule of thumb, most councils will look at least 2 years. But it doesn't mean that if it is less than 2 years, then you are in trouble, or if it is more than 2 years, you are out of trouble.
Yeah.
The question that you need to ask yourself, as I said before, is one, the timing, which is what you are looking at. And the second point is, why was it done? Was it done deliberately because you knew you were going into care? Or was it designed for a particular reason which you could justify? So it depends on the circumstances of the case. There was one case where I came across where the father gave £75,000 to a son to buy his own property. And it was done about 4 years beforehand. Council still raised the point, and that was explained. And details were given, evidence was given, and they were happy with that.
Yeah, I think you've answered effectively the second part of it, because it's about putting a residence in a trust. And then the question
Now,
is this deliberate deprivation or dangerous?
Now, we have to be extremely careful when we are talking about reducing the size of your assets. For two reasons. One is obviously, if you start putting it in trusts, you have to look at the consequences, legal, taxation, and all those things. But also, it may not work if the councils feel that you have done it deliberately and you have deliberately deprived yourself of those assets. And the second point, more important point from a lawyer's point of view, will be if you give away assets and then later on you don't have them, you need them, then what are you going to do? You might say, okay, I'll give my house to my son, but in 2 years' time, the son says, this is my house, now can you move out? Then what are you going to do? Once you have given it away, it's not yours anymore. So it would be unwise, it would be risky to give away assets, which are your security. So you have to balance all those different things.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. No.
I've got one. Yeah. Again, sorry, Atul bhai, these are all being bombarded at you. Just
no worries.
One question was, the process once you refer it and it goes to an ombudsman, what's the? Why does it take that long?
Okay. Now, ombudsman service, it's not like a formal court. It has process, it has rules, but it's informal. It's supposed to be informal. And there is a large number of people who are taking their complaints to the ombudsman because they are not happy. And why are they not happy? Because of the big number of councils saying that you don't get help because they are under budget cuts, or there may be other technical reasons. Now, when people take their cases to ombudsman and they are doing it themselves, they can fall into the trap where they don't know what they are doing, and sometimes things are repeated, or it takes longer to satisfy the ombudsman, or the ombudsman asks for more documentation, so it can make it longer.
Great.
Chetan?
Okay, so the question that I have is, there have been cases of cruelty towards some of the elderly in care homes. What rights do family members have to intervene if they are a victim? Now, the first question I'll ask, if I can ask Vishal, what formal documents do care homes require family members to have so that they can make decisions or ask questions to care homes? So what sort of documents do you look for?
So first and foremost, I think for any care provider, the utmost priority and being is really to make sure that those that they support, they give the best quality care possible. And as part of that, because there is a vulnerable population, there are obviously some remits, especially around safeguarding, which is taken as a huge priority. Care providers are very much regulated and are inspected and assessed very regularly. And safeguarding in particular is part of legislation and process, which allows people to actually raise any concerns in an appropriate manner. Now, when you're talking about a family member that is concerned, or there is a resident in particular that's concerned, the first point of call, and hopefully, is that there is open dialogue with the care provider management team and the team that is directly there on site to be able to actually raise any concerns. And in that concern, it can be anything. It doesn't have to require any documentation. It could be just a concern that you have in particular. If it's of concern of an abusive nature, or there is some concern even in safeguarding, that particular concern can be raised and has to be investigated. It is a duty of care for a provider to actually take on board any complaint of that nature. Ideally, obviously, it can be verbal, it could be through a meeting. If it requires a formal complaint because it's of the nature, it may be required to put into paper so that it can be followed up. But normally that is a duty and a right, effectively, that everyone has to be able to at least raise that concern to the provider. If that access isn't available, so for example, if there is a concern that even the management team isn't accessible or the team isn't accessible to take that concern, then there are avenues and channels that are always available. And CQC is the main regulator where you can directly go to and make a complaint and raise the concern. And also, if obviously you have authorities are also part and parcel of that and have safeguarding teams that do the investigation, that can be accessed as well. So at that point in time, even just raising the concern in particular is important. We've obviously seen some cases where resident families have taken it into their own matters to actually put some cameras, for example, sometimes into care homes, and to try and, because I presume in those situations, there isn't that open dialogue with the care providers and the care team that they feel concerned enough that they need to put that. Obviously that provides evidence, but it also shows that there is no real trust between families and the care providers as well. And that firstly needs to be addressed in particular, that actually, do you feel that actually there is that trust between the care providers and the family members and the residents in particular? And so, before even going down that route, I would encourage everyone to make sure they have a good dialogue with the care management teams that are providers and open that directly with them without having to go to a resort of having to actually put any cameras in place.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful and practical advice. Leading on from there, assuming that the families have tried to open dialogue and some things haven't worked out, or they've been stonewalled, Atul, by the next question to you, something that I think was previously covered in Shandibai's talk on wills and LPAs will be relevant to this as well, I believe. But what precautions should families take? So first, making sure that they have the authority to have the dialogue in the first place. And secondly, what challenges can they make if things fail?
Okay. Now, I think the first thing that we need to make sure is the choice of the care home. So you need to investigate yourself, search yourself, and make sure that you've got enough information about the care home where you're going into. CQC is a good website to start with. And once you are happy with the care home, it doesn't mean that things don't go wrong. Things can still go wrong. Now, for another person to step in and start making a complaint, communicating, or doing things, that person needs to have authority. And sometimes you have a situation where the person staying in the care home hasn't given authority or is unable to give authority. So you have first hurdle, which is to make sure that person going into the care home has put into place powers of attorney, lasting powers of attorney, to make sure that if things go wrong, then there is somebody who can speak out for yourself and take the matter up. The second thing is, obviously, if things are going wrong, is to keep a record of what is going wrong in terms of chronology, as well as the actual facts and who the parties are, so that there is a record of the trail of what events have transpired. The second point, or the reflection of that, would be if things are going wrong, then keep also any paperwork or anything that you have to show what things are going wrong. And as Vishal has said, the first thing would be to raise it with the home, because that's your first point to ask for help. And if you are still not happy, then there are other avenues. But I think at that point, you also need to consider if things are seriously going wrong, whether a change of a care home is important. But for somebody else to help a person in the care home, you need to have lasting powers of attorney in place so that legally it can happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rohit?
Yep. Anuja, this is a question for you. Is PIP, the personal independence payment, only for working age people with a disability?
Yes, personal independence payment actually replaces disability living allowance, and previously we used to call it disability living allowance, and it is only for working age people. After retirement, you can claim for attendance allowance, which allows you to pay someone to look after you. Obviously, it depends on your level of disability, and if you need someone to look after you, attendance allowance, you can claim for that.
Okay, thank you. Nirmal?
Yeah, this is a question for Vishal, actually. Vishal, just sort of an indicative question to you. What's the weekly residential care home cost for an individual?
Okay, well, as you can see that, and you probably know that there are a variety of care types available and different types of care homes available. And I presume this question is directly for care homes, is it specifically?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So look, the actual weekly cost can vary, and that's largely dependent on the type of environment or the location that you're effectively looking to have your residents in. And as a result of that, you find that actually those that provide greater amenities or provide larger spaces and hospitality can go towards an upper end of a fee rate, and those that are more, less amenities in terms of actual building space, etc., but largely on care can be on the lower end. And generally what you'd find is that they vary from about £650 per week up to some of the very top end care homes that provide lots of hospitality services going beyond £1,500 per week, or even up to £1,800 a week. So that generally is the ballpark that you find.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Otherwise, this one's for you. Where an individual has received medical care and paid for it privately, so it could be either paid for it from their own sources or through an insurance policy, and then they, after that, need to go home and do require care assistance, will the councils get involved if in the first instance it's been private medical payments?
Okay. Now, I assume that when you talk about having paid for it, you're talking about something that has happened to them needing medical assistance.
That's correct, yes.
Now, if that is the case, then they would be in a hospital, be it private or state hospital. And before the person is discharged, there has to be what is known as an assessment to make sure they are suitable to go on to their next journey, home or in a care home. And if it transpires that there is a need for medical care, then I see no reason why where they got their treatment should be a bar, because the care needs relate to the future, so that it is more about the continuity and the regular care they will need in the future, be it medical care. In that case, if the assessment says that the person will need medical care as opposed to social care, then that is part of the payment by the NHS. You don't stay in a government hospital, so it's not NHS as government hospitals. It is NHS paid, which means that the assessment is for needs for medical care, but then because it's medical care, usually you don't have a financial assessment because medical care is not means tested, and it goes straight to getting the money from the NHS. So there shouldn't be, in my view, a problem. There might be a particular reason if something has gone wrong, but generally there shouldn't be any problem.
Okay, thank you.
Vishal, if I may direct this question on to you. Obviously, where you are looking for a care home, you would look at the CQC validation. Is there any other assessment criteria that should be considered as part of this process in your experience?
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, the CQC is obviously a good base in terms of it's a regulated service, so CQC always do an independent review. Actually, another website actually which has become probably a better place to go as a first point is something called carehome.co.uk. That's effectively like a TripAdvisor type service which provides testimonials effectively of care homes which are provided by relatives or those that use the service rather than the providers themselves. And so it's a good place to actually get a sense in terms of what others are feeling, and it gives a rating as well. But aside from a desktop situation, and I appreciate right now we're in a situation where you can't physically go to visit a care home. But actually the first point at which you get a feel for actually how a care home is and how the team are there is actually by going to visit. And I hugely encourage everyone to do that. Not only does it give you a sense of what the management team is like, what the caring nature of the team are, but also you get a sense of what type of activities take place in the care home as well. And you know, when you think about actually when you're residing somewhere, actually to have a full and purposeful life, I suppose you want to engage in as many activities or aspects of life as possible as well. And so you'll find when you go visit and you can actually ask for them as well what type of activities they daily do. A lot of them vary from things such as seated exercises to more engaged activities. There are some which actually are very much one-to-one activities to group activities. And sometimes if the care home has a vehicle accessible, then you can actually go regularly on outdoor trips. But even when the vehicle isn't owned by the care home, they will also have opportunities to go out and take groups out as well. So that is one aspect. Clearly, food is another aspect as well. And, you know, especially within our culture, we want to have particular types of food as well and make sure that certain cuisines and diets are catered for. So it would be important to actually look at what sort of meal options are available at that, whether there's, you know, the choices available. In particular, you know, there are now more in particular around London and certain areas of the country where there are more culturally specific care homes where actually you find that even food and diet, etc., are catered for our community in particular. So those sort of aspects are important. But I think the first important, ultimately, when you're going into care home, for residents and for families, they generally feel that the environment is obviously one that will give you the most confidence, but actually the care is so important that you need to meet the people in particular who are going to be there to deliver it and have that dialogue with them.
Okay. Do you guys want to add anything to that, Atul Bhai or Anuja?
A question for Vishal would be, is the care home required to have a number of registered doctors or nurses, or how does the actual professional side of it work in terms of clinical care?
Yeah, so actually there's no strict criteria as such in terms of saying that you should have X number of care providers or care assistants or medical team on site at all times. Naturally, if you are registered for nursing care, then you have to have a nurse on at all times. And usually the best practice would be that you have nurses available, depending on the number of the size of the home or the facility, you have that many nurses that are accessible and available to the needs. You'd also find that actually there is a skill competency more than anything as well required in particular care homes. So we haven't touched upon dementia much at the moment in this discussion, but actually dementia is becoming a huge area of support required and need in particular across all communities. And care homes are generally very well placed if they have the right skill set to actually support those living with dementia. So what would be required is to ensure that actually if you are catering or registered to support those with dementia, that you have that skill set available across the team and that training is done regularly. And in terms of people, I suppose you would find that actually the greater the dependency, I suppose, and this is based upon needs again, that the greater support that someone is required, then there'll be a greater requirement for the provider to provide that support in people as well. So this happens through the regular dialogues and communication that you may have with local authorities that are providing an assessment, that you also may have with CQC in terms of understanding a particular case. And you might find actually that a particular individual requires one-to-one care at all times because of that, the need that they have. You go through the assessment and you may provide it on that basis. There's no strict criteria to say that you have to have one-to-one, but if the need's required, then you would provide it.
One more question for you, Vishal. Sorry to interject. There are clients, people out there who care for themselves at home with friends, family coming in, but sometimes the carers need respite, so they want to go away.
Yes.
Do homes provide regularly temporary facilities for So maybe 6 weeks, 4 weeks, so that it allows the carers at home who are coming home time off.
Yeah, no, I think respite is a very important part, not only for informal carers, including the family, or also for more professional carers as well coming in. Not all care homes provide respite, but you'll find that if you go into the websites for most, or if you talk to most, or go to the carehome.co.uk, you'll find that there are a number of care homes that do provide respite bedrooms. They may also provide it on an ad hoc basis. So if availability is there and you are requesting it, then by their discretion, they may suggest that we can take someone on for a short-term basis. But it's always worthwhile asking the question. But most websites or most care homes would generally state if they do provide respite care beds.
Anuja, you would like to add something?
Yeah, so a couple of things. On your question whether there is a doctor attached to care homes. Although there's not a doctor attached to the care homes, but all care homes, be it private or NHS, the patients are all registered with a GP. Now, with the new primary care network, what's happening, and this is very new, is that each care home will have a named GP attached to the care home, and it's probably not happened yet, but in the near future we will be doing what we call virtual board rounds in the care homes. So we'll be either phoning them up on a regular basis, or even doing video calls on a regular basis just to check up on our patients. As you know, if a patient is unwell, we do go and visit the homes, and typically I'd probably visit 3 or 4 patients in a care home on a regular basis and on a daily basis. With terms, with support for carers, there are lots of things that we can do in general practice. Carers are actually identified on our system, on our computer system, and if we know that the carer wants an appointment either themselves or for the patient that they're caring with, we try and go out of our way to give them an appointment either on the telephone or a face-to-face appointment, if need be. We also have regular meetings, for carers. So we have group meetings for carers where we give them information about lots of different kind of benefits or any other support, such as respite care, to the carers. We also teach them how to do simple things such as changing a dressing or administering medication. Carers are also eligible for flu jabs, so they get the annual flu jab, even if they're not eligible otherwise, but just because they're a carer, they will get an annual flu jab. So there are lots of support available there for carers in terms of medical support. So if there is anyone that you're caring for, make yourself known to your general practice.
Okay, thank you. Nirmal?
Atul, this is a question for you, actually. You mentioned the savings, which are 23,250 and 14,250.
Nirmal, you need to speak up a little.
Sorry, Atul, this is a question for you. You mentioned that the savings thresholds are 23,250 and 14,250. However, if you had joint accounts or properties were in joint holdings and things like that, how do savings ratios get calculated at that time?
Okay. Thank you for the question. It's a good question. First of all, the assessor only looks at your assets of the person needing care. So if, for example, you have assets which are in joint names, then the assessor can only take a proportion of those joint assets. Now, how much to take into account also depends on who contributed to that asset. It is not automatically 50-50. So if, for example, if you feel that the other person to the joint asset contributed more, you need to show that so that less is taken into account for the person needing care. Sometimes you can have a situation where the proportions are 80-20. It can be 60-40. It can be 70-30. Or if it is husband and wife, they might say it's all equal, in which case they will look at 50% of the asset. And with the house, if they do take into account the house, obviously they will not look at the gross value. They will look at the value after deduction of the mortgage. And they also allow 10% for costs involved with selling a house. So it is not just the actual market value of the house, but less mortgage, less costs.
Okay, just a follow-up question from that, Atul bhai. So you mentioned about the house. Now, if the house was in question, but there were heirs and IHT wasn't in place, is it advisable that the IHT is put in place before they actually go down the care assessment route?
When you talk about planning for care,
Sorry, planning, yeah.
I think you need to look at the whole picture. If you look at care on its own, you might not be painting the full correct picture. So you need to look at care, you need to look at IHT, inheritance tax planning, you need to look at powers of attorney, you need to look at the will. So when you do that as a package, then hopefully the picture you come out with will be reflective of a full range of situations. And at that point is when you will consider what you have, how much you have, how would it affect future care. One danger that I always see, and I repeat it again, is if you give away assets, then obviously they are not in your control anymore. That means you can be at risk.
Just leading on to that, one of the questions that's been asked in the chat is where you have a property that's owned as tenants in common, and they do their estate planning, and in their will, they leave their share either to the children subject to a interest in possession trust for the spouse, or else on trust. Is this ring fence when it comes to calculations after the death of the deceased? So assuming the husband has died and the wife then needs to go into care, is the husband's share ring fenced?
Well, when you look at what I just said, that the assessor can only look at your assets, they can only look at the wife's assets. So if she didn't get the husband's share on his death, then they can't look at that. And it's up to the husband to decide what he wants to do with his share. Now, normally we would assume it goes to the spouse, the wife who is surviving. But with proper planning, it can happen that it is outside the care assessment. There's nothing wrong with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, go on, Ramit.
You had another one?
Go on, I'll ask after you.
Okay. All right, just a couple which I'm going to lump together. One is basically if a young person is already under care and then comes into funds, will the financial support change? And in the follow-up question really is, how often is financial needs assessments done? Because obviously people's circumstances change. And at the same time, it's another question, I'll just add it on because it's simple, is if you have started and you're paying because you had assets of more than 23,000, whatever the threshold was, and suddenly you have paid for your for your care, and then after a while it goes below the 14,250, is that the time where the council will then start paying fully for the care service? Sorry, that's to Atul bhai, please.
Okay, thank you for that big one. When you look at care, yes, it is ongoing care needs. As much as care needs change, financial circumstances will change. So let's look at it in a different way. If your assets go down, a time will come when you will probably qualify for more or full help from the council, in which case, first thing you straight away should do is approach the council for that change. So it doesn't mean that if you have been paying before, you end up continuing to pay forever. Obviously, if the financial position changes, you can always go back for help. But at the same time, look at the opposite, which is the council was paying for the care because your assets were less, and suddenly you come across money, then you have a duty to notify the council that you're now in funds so that they can obviously reduce the contributions they make. Now, again, if somebody is in care and there is an expectation that in the future they might inherit money, then that is also a point where you have to look at will planning for the person who might pass away, so that instead of giving it and it coming to the person in care, it is kept in trust or some other arrangement is made so that it doesn't jeopardize the care position and the funding position of the person in need of care.
Okay.
It's more about keeping on board. Now, one more thing that you need to be aware is obviously just like claiming benefits, where the care needs are social care, not medical, social care.
Mm-hmm.
Then clearly there is an ongoing duty to look at your finances as they change for the better or for worse. Now, obviously, if they change for the better, nobody else is suffering. So whether you notify or not, it doesn't matter. But if they increase, and then that means that it is possible that you may not qualify for benefits from the council, then yes, you have a duty to notify.
Okay.
If it is medical care, then question of assessments usually doesn't come in.
Okay. Chetan?
Yeah, so Atul bhai, sorry, because you had answered the question on the lasting powers of attorney, here's an interesting one. Please clarify, can you only raise concerns with the care provider if you have powers of attorney in place? Why can't you raise concerns if you don't have LPAs in place? Just as a matter of general interest, I think it would help the audience to actually understand the importance of LPAs.
Okay. First of all, there is no legal requirement that you need to have a lasting power of attorney. Many people out there don't have lasting powers of attorney, or for that matter, any power of attorney. Now, the person needing care, if they have mental capacity, they can always raise the concerns, complaints, raise the matter, conduct it with the help of family, friends, or somebody else. And everything is done in the name of the person who is getting care. But the situation becomes more difficult or impossible where the person needing care doesn't have mental capacity and is not able to give authority to somebody else to act on their behalf. And that is where having had a power of attorney would have helped. Now, if you don't have a power of attorney and the person needing care has capacity, then by all means that person can continue with the help from the family and friends or solicitors or lawyers, or they put one into place before they lose their capacity. Now, look at it from the care home point of view. Many times they will ask for a power of attorney because it's easier to deal with a person and a person's problem. But at the same time, there are situations where the person in care says, look, I don't need a power of attorney. I'm quite mentally capable. I just need physical help with things physically. In which case, there is no automatic requirement. You need to have a power. But as a matter of practice, it is always wise to have one.
Thank you. Nirmal, can we make this the last question as we are now running over time? You're muted. Unmute.
This question is for Vishal, actually. Vishal, just one thing to understand. If someone is actually looking at a care home and wants to look at the history of the care home in terms of just complaints or any abuse, misconduct, you mentioned that there was that carehomes.co.uk, but would that cover all of these items, or is there a official body that would actually provide all the other details around the care homes, so when someone's actually making a decision, they know what they're looking at? an official body?
But the short answer to that is that care services are regulated by CQC, and therefore CQC generally inspect care homes, and they provide a pretty detailed report actually that covers a significant, the full inspections generally cover quite all areas of the care home or care service, and that will include sort of notes and investigations around complaints, etc. And they will summarize that in the report. And you generally find that actually you find the history of a care home from that reporting. What it isn't, though, is it's not a live reporting system. It's not expected to be a live reporting system. And therefore, you'll find that actually right now there's a rating system at the moment in terms of its outstanding, good, requires improvement. Those sort of ratings are helpful to give you a guide. And those that are generally in the sort of requires improvement section will probably get inspected more regularly to ensure that they're getting back up track towards good or even move towards outstanding. So you might see more reports from them than an outstanding service, which actually might be left alone for a little while because it's doing well and have an inspection later on. The carehome.co.uk, the reason why it's helpful is that it's actually probably more live than the CQC, and it gives you a more of a testimonial basis. So actually how relatives find it, how residents generally experience are in the care home, because whilst even you may have the paperwork incorrect, but the actual care being provided is excellent, then actually that could be reflected in carehome.co.uk as well. So that's but I just, if I can just extend a little bit on that, I mean, I think ultimately care homes are one thing. Obviously the spectrum of care is wider than just care homes. It's actually there's opportunities that we've mentioned in terms of respite care. There's also a number of daycare services that you can utilize to help and support. On the other end, there's also a housing with care model, which effectively goes into retirement care and looking at also sheltered living and extra care facilities. And when there's a registered provider of care there, then they will also be inspected as well. But in all of these, there's very much a positive choice. You know, you make a choice to help and improve someone's well-being. So when you go through that, you don't have to go directly and think that social care means straight away to a care home. You can actually start looking at other care in advance of that and see how support can come in advance. And you might find that actually care home is the best route from day one because the environment's better, but it may not be. But there's lots of other, and similarly for domiciliary care providers, home care providers, there's another website similar to carehome.co.uk for care homes. It's the other way around, which is homecare.co.uk, which is the testimonial service for home care providers, domiciliary care providers.
Okay, and just one other thing, the reports that you mentioned earlier, so are they on demand, or is that something that's just in the public domain for people?
It's on the website, so you can actually go on to cqc.org.uk, search for a care home, and you can see the inspection reports directly there.
Okay.
I thank you very much indeed. Sorry, I think we've now run out of time. We do have other questions. What we're going to do is we will basically take all the questions that we have and we will try and get those answered and put them on the YouTube CAT8 webinars channel. It will take a little bit of time, so please bear with us. But first and foremost, I'd really like to thank Atul Bhai for a fantastic presentation, Dr. Anuja Shah and Vishal for being great panelists and helping us with this webinar. Thank you again very, very much for giving us your time. If I can go to the next slide, please, Kilit. Please, this is our poster for people needing help, those elderly, vulnerable, and isolation, and key workers. There's a number there. You can call us on that. There's also, if you go to the next, if you got any further questions from today's webinar, please call, SMS, or WhatsApp our helpline number here, and we'll try and get back to you. Next, these are the next presentations coming along. We've got basically the government assistance schemes explained, especially with respect to the practical aspects, how they've been functioning to date, because they're now live. And then that's on Wednesday, the 27th, and on the 31st, which is next Sunday, we have a session on pensions. So please register for these two sessions, and we would really like to welcome you to come along. One other thing, Vishal's involved in another care home services called Sweet Tree Home Care Services, and they're organizing a series of webinars on dementia or learning to care for someone who is suffering from dementia. especially during COVID. These are taking place every Tuesdays weekly at 2 p.m. So for those who want to tune into those, please go into www.sweettree.co.uk and register yourself, and you'll be able to see a couple which have already happened. So you'll be able to see the whole host of those. That's it. And if you have any suggestions, go to the next slide, please. Please let us know about any future webinars that you have suggestions for at our CAT8 webinars@gmail.com. And thank you again for everybody for attending today. Be safe, stay alert, control the virus, and save lives. Goodbye. Thank you.